Well, my Canadian name is Katherine Thomas, and my spirit name is Aski, which means Earth Old Woman. And I'm from the Eagle clan, from my grandmother's side, and I'm from Matthias Colom Cree Nation. And I have 12 children, 9 girls, 3 boys, and I have 20 grandchildren. Yeah. I actually grew up in the bush, as I call it. My dad was a guide, and I grew up the first 7 years of my life in the bush with my mom. And my older siblings went to residential school. And I went when I was 7 years old. I went there for 3 years. And then we moved to Winnipeg. I've lived here for 42 years. And I raised my kids in the inner city, and my grandchildren are being raised here too. And I didn't know anything about trauma of residential school. I didn't know anything about politics. I didn't know about anything, because when you grow up in, because my family has 3 generations of residential school trauma. So there was a lot of things that I needed to change in my life. So I was in my world of trying to change things in my life. The violence that I saw, I didn't want it in my home. All the horrible things that I've seen, I didn't want it in part of my life. And I tried to change those things. So I was focused on raising my kids and educating myself. I went to school. I was a high honor student when I took courses, took 6 of them. And I raised my kids in the North End. There was a lot of problems with my boys, with the police. They were always stopped because they grew their hair. When we started learning about to be proud of who we are. And we lived in Point Douglas, and my son, he was 16, I think, where he asked me to cut his hair. And I asked him why. And he said, so the police will stop harassing me. He cried when he cut his hair. He sobbed. And his older brother said, how come you were keeping your hair? That's because I know how to run. But he became a preppy boy, short hair, and the police never bothered him after that. So those are issues that we live with, not just that. I'm not saying that all policemen are like that. A lot of them are awesome. They're awesome. They protect our community and help us when we need them. But there's still problems with that we deal with today. And it really affects our young people drastically. Their self-esteem, how they feel about themselves. And just all these things that I experienced living in Winnipeg, raising my kids, trying to maneuver myself through the systems to better my life was really hard. There was a point in my life where I actually wanted to give up, and I called CFS to come and get my kids. And I told them, I can't do it anymore. I didn't realize that I had post-trauma from residential school, and I had, what do you call that? That baby thing, postpartum depression. And I called them, and they said, no, we don't take children. We support you and help you. And they did. They supported me through it. They helped me get daycare. They helped me get to get to school. And never once did they put me down or make me feel like I couldn't do it. Not once. So it was really good for me with them. And at that point in my life, if they would have said anything negative to me or said, yeah, you're not a good mother, yeah, they need to be in care, I would have agreed with them. I would have totally agreed with them. But they didn't. And the reason why I'm speaking about them, this was like, so many years ago, 30, 25 years ago. The reason why I mention that is because when my grandchildren were apprehended, I thought it would be the same for them. They would get help, they would support them, but it wasn't. So this is where, before I wasn't involved really in community, just church stuff. I wasn't involved in changes or marches or anything because I was already still in that my world trying to change things. Because how can I help others if my world is not the way I want it to be? And so I started when my grandchildren got taken. The first one was 7 years ago. So altogether 5 so far. 2 are home, and there's still 3 in there. And I've seen the system now, how it treats the people, the parents, because I've seen it with my own eyes. I could only speak from my experience. Put downs, threatening them they'll never get their kids back if they don't do this or do that, or you're not doing it right, or you're not supposed to do that, like just totally controlling their lives. And when you do that to a person and you take that hope away from them, they kind of give up. Because there was a point where my daughter said, "Go ahead, have them. I can't do this anymore." But she didn't. She's stronger than they thought. So that's what changed my life, is when I seen my grandchildren getting taken, that I had to be part of the solution, part of the working in the community. I'm a spiritual caregiver at Living Word Temple and at Turtle Island Community Church. And we do reconciliation work. We do the blanket exercise. We go to reserves, and we even go to overseas to see how the people over there have changed to get better. Like we went to Dominican Republic just a few weeks ago, and they had a piece of bread wrapped in a paper that had what do you call that, a headdress on. And I said, "Those are my people." And the pastor goes, so are mine. So I guess those were the first people that were there, and they don't have government funding, and they get a lot of help from churches from everywhere in the world, and they're thriving and doing better. And I felt like, I wish I could move here and bring all my family here, because you see kids. When I was riding in a motorcycle, there are babies in the middle and their mothers in the back in motorcycles. Kids are running around in their birthday suits, and they're happy, and CFS is not there to take them. And it's amazing how in Canada they take kids for every reason. Meanwhile, more than half of the world are more, they're not as rich as we are here in Canada. So it really opened my eyes for the reasons why they take our children. This is a baby eagle feather that was given to me 2 years ago. I'm holding it because it represents the children. And when I think about reconciliation, when Harper made the apology of it'll never happen again, it's almost like a joke when it's happening right before our eyes. It's not called residential school. It's not called 60 Scoop. It's called CFS. If they say it's never going to happen again and it's happening right now, how come Canada is not speaking up or saying anything? When our children are still being taken, over 100,000 across Canada. I think 80,000 in Manitoba. I don't know if they change it. They change the numbers all the time. This is the hardest thing I have to deal with, because I see it with my own family, with our community members, with our reserves. And that's not reconciliation for Canada. I think reconciliation would be what they did for me, supported me, helped me out so that I could raise my kids That's reconciliation right there. But when you take children, you take that love also from that child and the parents. Because love is an action word. You're there to nurture them, to love them, to take care of them. That's what love is. You know, and when you take that away from a family, it's devastating. It's devastating to our nation. It's devastating to parents. It's devastating, and you still see it. And for Canada to still have CFS the way it is set up now, that's not reconciliation. And I noticed too that all the programs and all our even churches, organizations that are here, wouldn't you think the numbers would be going down with our incarceration, with CFS apprehension, with sicknesses, with everything that our First Nations people go through? Don't you think it would go down? And what I see is it's only creating jobs for everybody else to take care of their families. We're like a product, like the Indian Act. It's an act, just like the Food Act, the Animal Act, all these acts that are in place. We're the only people that are governed under an act. And I don't think that's right, because we're not a product, we're human beings. And the thing about human beings, they only passed that in 2014, that we're considered human beings, that we're not savages. And this is the year 2018, you know. So these are things that I found out that affects our people so much. It affects our nation. It affects our relationship with Canada. I don't find that there's much reconciliation. There's more programs, more organizations. But actually, I feel, because through my eyes, I'm a community member, I'm a mother, and we're in the community. We're not politicians, we're not people with money, and it still affects us greatly. And it's sad. It's sad because we're supposed to be the richest people in this country. And people even me, I didn't know all this stuff. I didn't know all these things that affect our people, but when it hits home, again, you try and make changes, but it keeps hitting home. These systems keep affecting us. And I think that's when if we get involved and we speak about it and wake people's minds and hearts, the more we talk about it and action, there will be a lot of people say, even I say that, people are talking about it a lot, but they need to do action. Like our church, we've one little church in the north end here, right in the north end, right in Ground Zero, we were told our little church is at. We started 5 years ago, and it's grown to worldwide, where we have partners from the other side of the world, from Canada and from other countries, and we partner up and learn each other and support each other, and that's reconciliation. So the churches are doing their part. A lot of them don't, because they still think our culture and our ceremonies and are evil. And they're not. All those ceremonies and teachings, the feather, everything that we do, they all have a teaching in it. They have a purpose for it. It's not voodoo or anything. They all have a purpose, and they're passed down from generation to generation, so that we don't forget our way, we don't forget our languages, we don't forget our teachings. It's passed down all the way. And when the church and the government got together to assimilate and colonize our people, they took our language, our way of life, the way we raise our children, the way we do things, the way we govern ourselves, and try to colonize us to be like them. So when I think about the things that are in place, we're going to the colonizer for help. Like, for instance, if we are in trouble with the law, we go to a lawyer that's representing the government, right? So why would we go to a lawyer that's representing the government? And that's why you see our people in jail, because they're not properly represented in court. I could say that because my children weren't represented properly in court. My son spoke for himself, and he got himself out of court because he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. So they tried to give him 20 years, but he said no. I wasn't there. I didn't do it, and I'm not gonna get a lawyer. And same with my girls. They weren't represented properly at all by legal aid. So we're going to people that are supposed to help us, but then coming from my perspective, it's our own people that we need to get help from, because we know where we're coming from. We know what works for us, because you can't use colonized way of life when that's the reason why we are in the place we're in Canada. It just doesn't make sense. And that's the reason why we learn more about our ancestors, the way they lived, the way they taught, because it's in our blood, it's in our DNA, and we remember these things. And the old people that are still alive tell us these stories, where I'm not ashamed anymore that I'm an Indigenous proud woman. And before I was, because I didn't feel worthy to be anything. And our children feel like that because they don't have their language, they don't have their culture, they don't have family, because they're being separated. And I think that's the biggest thing about reconciliation, is to bring our families back together, help them. By taking them away is not helping. We're just going to keep going in circles, And part of that reconciliation too is the land that we live in. With it's not just corporations that are destroying our land; it's us too, if you think about it. Because we use all the things that corporations, like the oil or whatever material things, we are still responsible, all of us. And I never really thought about that before, but we are responsible, all of us, to protect our land, because we need water, we need the animals, we need the ecosystem to stay the way it is. And if we don't wake up, one day we'll be paying $1,000 for a cup of water, So reconciliation for us is an action word. You got to start doing action. And I pray that the families that are apart, that they'll come back and bring our children home. Not in 10 years, but it should be done right away. Because it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to see our community members and our reserves, our families going through this. Because when you're in that place, you don't care about what's going on in politics. You don't care about what's going on in the community. Because you're in that dark place. That's the worst thing you could ever do to a human being. Worst thing is to take their children. If you want to oppress, colonize, break a person, that's what you will do, is take their children. Our community, we know what's going on. We actually go what's going on in our community and what affects us. And even we had a whole bunch of incidences a while ago. And there's a whole organizations that come together to try and fix it or talk about it. And we had an emergency at William White because there's so many things happening. And with all the things that were happening that the community members were talking about, none of these organizations couldn't get involved. or couldn't do anything about it because they had policies and regulations that they had to follow. And these are the things that keep us in that place where, well, nobody can do anything to help us, you know. And some people kind of say, I'm not going to say who, I'm going to break a little rule. I'm not supposed to, but I am. And that's what helps. There's too many policies and regulations that keep people down. People need to be human. They need to love. And I think that's what's missing a lot, is that love. To love another human being, to help a human being up. I don't think programs, maybe for some people, it depends who you know. It depends how well you know how to maneuver through the systems. And you can get help. Mostly with who you know. They will come if you ask. But a lot of people don't know the important people that could make a difference. So there's so much drugs going around, that meth, and it's so it's destroying our people. Just another thing to destroy them, because they're trying to hide that pain that they're having. But I still have hope. I have hope. The only reason why I'm able to cope every day is because of Creator, because of Jesus, that I'm able to cope every day. He's journeying me through this. If I didn't have that, I probably would be in a very bad place. And I've accepted that we'll never live in a perfect world. But that doesn't mean we strive to do social justice and strive to have a better world. I know a lot of people would kind of disagree with me, because some of our reserves actually do good, but there's a price for that. Our water and our resources and everything that comes with it, because sometimes they're too tired to living in poverty and that, so they make deals, but our land and our water pays for it. And those are the people that would disagree with me. But what I can't not ignore is the pain and suffering that our people are still going through. When I went to Dominican, I had a hard time. For 2 days there, I cried. Because I said, what am I doing here? Our own First Nations people live in third world countries. But I know why I was there. Because they did it. They could survive without government aid and help each other. I think we need to help each other. Because they said, as long as you have your hand out to the government, you'll always be an oppressed people. Because why ruin a well-oiled machine when our people create jobs for others in Canada? Who wants to fix that, right?